There are over a dozen weapons in Monster Hunter Rise for us players to use. 14 to be exact, or 15 if you count the criminally underrated kunais. And it stands to reason that out of all these weapons, there is bound to be one that leads the pack. No matter how much balancing the developers try to do, there is always going to be one weapon that outdamages all the others. No matter how much fun or interesting mechanics they try to spread amongst the whole roster, there is going to be one weapon that always wins the popularity contest. My goal when I picked up this weapon for the very first time live on stream was to find out just what all the hype was about. And the goal of this video is to see if it lives up to that hype. What we have here is the weebiest of the weeb weapons, the longsword. Howdy y'all, my name is Kanan96 and welcome to the Agony of Gaming, the satirical review series where delivering factually correct information and hilarious comedy is attempted but is not guaranteed. I started my Monster Hunter experience with the previous game, Monster Hunter World, and I did not do it alone. I was brought into it by this man that goes by the name Monster_Hunter_memes on Instagram, and since that profile name has an ungodly amount of syllables, I'm just going to be referring to him as my friend Sergio. When we first started playing Monster Hunter World together, there was one weapon that just made Sergio's blue jeans fit tighter, and that was, of course, the longsword. Which also seemed to be the case with the entire community because it was all I ever heard people talking about when the weapons were brought to discussion. So I made it my personal goal to use every weapon other than the longsword. As well as switch axe and insect glaive, but especially not use the longsword. Not entirely sure what it is, but whenever I see something mainstream, my instant gut reaction is just to anything other than that. I spent my entire childhood being the different one. Why stop now? I wonder if it's a result of being bullied too much growing up, or maybe not being bullied enough. Do I need therapy? While I was making this series, I never knew which weapon was going to be next, but I always knew that the longsword was going to be last, and you can thank this man for that. Pinche verga. I mean, I love him to death. But still, vete a la verga. And I'm sure he's going to comment like, well, of course the longsword was the final video. He was simply saving the best for last. It's quite obvious. Wow, that is yet to be determined. The actual reason is spite. Mostly because I believe that the hunting horn should be the most popular weapon instead, but I'm sure if the longsword didn't exist, the horn would still be bottom tier. Just one like from you is all that is needed in order to ensure that a hunting horn main gets to eat this week. Alright, 2 pages into this damn script, let's finally talk about why everyone and their mama loves this weapon so much. If I had to use a single word to describe this weapon's combat style, it would be fluidity.
The horn. I don't think it means what you think it means.
It seems like every single motion with the longsword can be transitioned directly into another one seamlessly. While it is true that basically every melee weapon in the game has some form of combo system, where pushing buttons on the controller in a specific order can have your hunter deal attacks in succession, and granted, fundamentally it's the same thing with the longsword, it just feels so much different. It reminds me a lot of using the switch axe, where axe mode may have made you feel like a legitimate surly lumberjack chopping down some wood. Sword mode, however, made you feel like a majestic dancer, but instead of captivating an audience, you were butchering monsters the size of houses. The longsword takes the feeling of the switch axe's sword mode and amplifies it to the next level. Now, since I was born with 2 heads instead of 1, putting what I feel into words is actually quite difficult. Let me use an analogy involving paint. Using a combination of attacks from any other weapon is like using a paintball to splatter projectiles all over a brick wall, compared to the longsword, which feels like using a brand new paintbrush on a milky white canvas. And I think the #1 cause of this is animation. Watching your hunter move this comically large sword around themselves in such a poised manner is somewhat captivating. Now, these things aren't as big as greatswords, but they probably still weigh as much as the hunters do. Actually, the greatsword is a good example. You see, these things should be scientifically impossible for the hunters to even lift. They just do it anyways because video games. But they get swung by the weapon as much as they do the swinging. With the longsword, you just feel in control of every single motion. Everything your hunter does is with purpose, and it makes you feel very confident, sometimes overconfident to the point of being reckless. I was surprised when doing research for this video, and yes, I do research a little. Okay, very little. But I do research. I said do. And that the longsword was actually a derivative of the greatsword, where you did less damage per hit but attacked faster and had slightly more movement options. And over the years, they just compounded that fluid combat feel of the weapon even before they added a few mechanics that made the overconfident issue I just mentioned even worse. Those being the counters. For anyone who may have missed my lance video, a counter is a maneuver that takes a monster's attack and turns it into an advantage for yourself. The longsword does this in spades. It may not have as many as the lance does, but it makes up for it by the ones you do have being ridiculously more useful. The first one is one of your skill bind abilities, where you essentially tell the monster, "No sir, you activated my trap card, you will not be damaging me today." The second counter involves your hunter purposely sheathing their weapon after an attack to then do a quick draw as a counter response when the monster is about to strike, causing the hunter to not take the hit, but instead deal a significant amount of damage while also filling up one level of their spirit gauge. Oh yes, another charging mechanic. Boy, do I ever hate these things. But I suppose they had to neuter the weapon somehow because they knew just how powerful it could be. I was going to call this counter move a bunch of anime nonsense, but then I realized that would be a little insensitive once I discovered that it is part of a legitimate Japanese martial art called Iai Jutsu that is almost 700 years old. There, now nobody can ever call me uncultured again. Learning how to counter during a monster's attack and continuing your combos really just makes the weapon. And you are rewarded by doing so because if you fill up the spirit gauge to red level, you will be doing a pretty significant amount of bonus damage, as well as having access to one of the flashiest and deadliest attacks in the game, the Helmbreaker. This move is truly amazing. Used in tandem with the soaring kick, you launch yourself in the air and come down blade first, dealing a multi-hit attack that has 8 ticks of damage. It's just essentially hitting 2 buttons on the controller and then boom, 1,000 of the monster's hit points are vaporized instantly. When using the hammer, getting off a full Big Bang combo is incredibly satisfying, partly because it's pretty difficult to do on a monster that isn't vulnerable. But the Helmbreaker is just as satisfying, way more effective, and significantly easier to do. It's legitimately unfair. There's just no comparison. I only spent roughly 10 hours using the longsword, so honestly I could probably hunt a monster faster with the gun lance simply because I have way more time using that weapon. But even with the little time I spent with it, I must say, I think I understand where all the love is coming from. I would not be surprised if a novice hunter brand new to the series picked up the longsword for the very first time and stated that it just felt good to them. The fluidity of the smooth motion, the ability to counter anything the monster can throw at you, and on top of dealing some amazing damage, it's a pretty hard experience to beat. Now, going back to the 2 statements I made earlier in the video about one weapon being the strongest and the most popular. Well, when it comes to damage, it's still the light bowgun. Yeah, that thing has been at the top of the speedrun charts for a while. But in terms of popularity, I could finally see why the longsword is the weapon class president. Not saying I'm happy with these usage percentages being what they are, but now, at least I understand. And I really hope Sergio doesn't make it this far into the video because I have to begrudgingly admit that I am very much looking forward to using the longsword in the future. I would like to sincerely thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing if you haven't done so already. This is my final video on this Monster Hunter Rise weapon review series. I'll leave a link to the series playlist down in the description in case you want to catch up on older videos you may have missed. Preferably not the first two because those were kind of rough. You know, my goal was to be at 250 subscribers before the series was over. I wonder if I made it or not. Anyways, after this, I'm going to move on to something completely different. I'm thinking about content on Monster Hunter Stories 2, you know, keeping the whole Monster Hunter series vibe going for a bit longer. I have like 4 videos planned, but that's only like a month of content. After that, who knows? Maybe an older Monster Hunter game or something completely different. We'll just have to see. But until then, this is not goodbye for good, just goodbye for now. Nope. There you go. Yeah! Oh, that was so awesome. Get off my green screen.